Maliki, Tulukelo.
Ngobo Sibongiseni.
Ketse, Kuti, Peter.
Please raise your right hand and say, so help me God, for an affirmation. You do the same, but say, I do. Our country has challenges. Meditate about the solutions to corruption, to crime, to anything of concern that you have.
Well, a very good evening to you, and of course, fresh off the inauguration of President Cyril Ramaphosa, does it spell a new dawn? So if we look back to 1976, that generation rewrote history, but for some time now, many would argue that young people have been perceived to have taken the back seat in the political landscape, but now a number of young people who are going to represent political parties in Parliament has increased by including a number of faces that were at the forefront of nationwide fights for free education. So the question, of course, we'll all be asking is how will they use their voices to raise the concerns of young people in the country riddled by, amongst other many challenges, including the high youth unemployment rate. So let's welcome 26-year-old ANC MP Colin Tlulugelo Malaki, as well as a 26-year-old Peter Ketse from the EFF. Those two join me here in our Johannesburg studio. Sibongiseni Ngobo from the Democratic Alliance is joining us from our studios in Durban. To you, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It certainly is a pleasure to have you all here. I have to point out also that it wasn't initially an all-male panel. We had invited, of course, from the EFF, one of the young female members of Parliament, but unfortunately she fell ill. But Peter, thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's great to have you here. I think let me start with you. I think all of you going forward, I guess we're all referring to you as honourable members now. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me start with you, Mr. Malaki. As a young person, you know, many people are looking to you as the younger generation to go and represent their views in Parliament. How do you plan to use your voice to make sure that the concerns of young people are brought to the National Assembly?
Thank you very much. I think I'll first start by the most important thing that I feel that all of us, young people from all different political parties, must start with. We had a lot of young people that we united and joined hands with to fight for free education until tertiary level. And a lot of these young people have been, some of them have been arrested, others are going through trials. And I think the first thing that we need to do, I think as young people are sent to Parliament, is to fight very hard that those who are charged, the charges must be dropped. Those who are found guilty, the president must find a way of pardoning them to release them, because we're in a country where there's a high level of unemployment, and we can't afford to have graduates who've got criminal records who'll add on, and their only crime was to fight for free compulsory education. But the most important thing that I think we need to deal with, especially when we get to Parliament, is the issue of the skills revolution. We can't afford anymore the corner those days where we still have young people who are in the corners of South Africa who are not only unemployed but they're unskilled youth. I think we would rather deal with an issue of having a lot of skilled young people to a point whereby we end up exporting the skill outside the country. The other issue that is facing us is the issue of high usage of drugs in communities. We need to develop programs and pass policies that will make it impossible for anyone to sell drugs in our communities and for any young person to use the drugs.
Mr. Malaki, one could argue that it is your government, the government of the ANC, that jailed these young people for being in the forefront of wanting free education, and also on the issue of skills as well. You know, the issue of drugs has ravaged many communities around South Africa, and those programs, some would say, should have long been implemented to, like you say, make it impossible for young people to have so much free time to participate in those kinds of activities.
Look, the issue of, remember, the state is divided. There's the judiciary, there's executive, and there's legislature. Now, they operate it that way. That's why it's a process of lobbying. Yes, it's not a one-man show. That's the beauty about our democracy of South Africa. There is no one person. The executive can't sit alone, which the ANC deploys and says that jail who, don't jail who. The judiciary has got that level of independence. That's why I was saying that with the powers given to the president, he needs to utilize those powers to pardon those who have been affected. And that is the lobbying that we're doing also internally in structures of the ANC, And the lobbying will continue to do everywhere and every time we meet with the president of the ANC. The issue of drugs, there are programs that are there, but I still say that more must be done. And the new administration led by the President Ramaphosa must be able to set up programs to make sure that they fast track the issues of crime enforcement to resolve, because the issues, drugs are sold illegally in South Africa. Now we need to make sure that wherever they are sold, there is enforcement, law enforcement to resolve those crises.
Mr. Ketsi, let me bring you in there. You know, you were also one of those leaders at the forefront of the Fees Must Fall movement. What does this mean for the Fees Must Fall movement now? Is it done, dead and buried? How do you plan to use your voice in Parliament to move on some of the issues that, amongst others, the EFF, the ANC, had fought for on the ground pertaining to young people, including free decolonized education?
You are capturing it correctly, and thanks for having us. Look, the fight for free education, it was not only in terms of its own monetary value, but also the content of the education we continue to get in this country. And one of the things that we will be, fighting there in Parliament is the curriculum that we get in this country. You know, when we speak about the unemployment and the drug issues, and they all go back to what kind of education we get. If you go to the early childhood development, children from that early age, they're not taught on how to be responsible, on how to love their country. They're not taught what are the surroundings around them. I'll give you an example. You know, South Africa, we all know, it's a public knowledge for many people to say more than 75% of platinum is found in South Africa. But very few people know the significant use or the purpose of platinum. How does it get used? So it's the kind of education that we get that can only benefit the captains of the industry. They decide what we should learn, and then they come and absorb the creme de la creme that comes from those universities and dispose the rest of the graduates. So it is our responsibility, collective responsibility, not only young people from the EFF, but all young people in this country, everyone. We ought to sit down and say, what kind of decolonized education we want? How will it look like, right? So those are the kind of few issues that we will really need to be stressing. And of course, the pardoning of all leaders of the Fees Must Fall. It is very imperative that the president pardon those people. And we are of the view that, the EFF have tabled that motion in the 5th Parliament, you would know that, which is why we stand here today to say, the involvement of young people from the EFF in Parliament doesn't necessarily mean the EFF will start speaking about issues of young people. They've been doing that in the 5th Parliament and will continue where they left off.
All right. Sibongiseni, let me bring you in there from Durban. I'm sure you're able to hear us. I guess this is, a far move from when you were fighting at UKZN to have the Democratic Alliance Student Organisation recognised there. Now you're off, of course, to Parliament. How do you plan to use your voice to ensure that the issues of young people are prioritised in the National Assembly?
Good evening to you and to your viewers at home and to the gentlemen there. Thank you so much for having me. I think that the most important thing right now as a young person is that over 50% of young people across the country are without a job. They are unable to find a job. And what I'm going to do as a young person who is in the DA caucus in the National Assembly is to make sure that I work together alongside my colleagues to bring workable solutions that will help us create jobs for as many people in South Africa as possible. I mean, it can't be right that 27.6% of people in South Africa are unable to find jobs. Surely we must do something. But the starting point really will be for us to grow our economy. It's a sad reality that our economy last year only grew by 0.8%. We have to get the South African economy working again. That is why our caucus in the coming few weeks will table a Jobs Act. This Jobs Act will be intended or will be aimed at growing our economy and making sure that we create jobs for the people, and we're hoping that other political parties in the National Assembly will support it. So I think that what I will be doing is making sure that I raise the issues that young people are facing, but not just issues that young people are facing, issues that, challenges that South Africans, even all the people that are facing. Because at the end of the day, as much as I'm a young person, but I'm a member of parliament, and in terms of our constitution, we have to represent everyone. Black, young, old, Indian, colored, everyone must be represented in parliament.
I'm not sure how far we are to a break at the moment, but we'll just continue. I'm hoping to give each of you enough time to speak before we wrap up. Time tends to move quite fast. But how then do you prioritize those issues? Let me start with you, Mr. Ketsi, on this one, where you have young people who feel that not much has been done to assist them. Yes, there are programs that have been put in place, but you always find young people sitting on the periphery thinking perhaps they've been forgotten. How do you then change that as a collective? I hear a lot of collective responsibility coming from all three of you, but how do you change that in a parliament that has been dominated for the longest time by old people, I'll say it?
Look, I think there's something we need to capture very correctly. There can't be jobs falling off the sky and the next thing there is employment. There must be political willingness from the government. And we had the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, when he was inaugurated, he spoke about how they are going to be creating employment. But that is the same thing that all the presidents have been saying when they take oath of office. And as a young person, and which is why you find many young people starting to lose interest in participation in a democratic process of elections. They don't register to vote. They don't want to participate because they feel like they're excluded. You are capturing it correctly. The only way, it's unfortunate that the EFF couldn't get decisive votes. South Africans decided otherwise because we have a cogent plan on how we're going to create employment in South Africa. But nonetheless, even when we're on the opposition benches, we have a responsibility and duty to, pressurize government to put on the measures on how we can manage this thing of creating employment in South Africa. We can't just sit down and say they won and nothing happens. We ought to then look deeply in our manifesto, in our commitments, and make sure we do the same things we have been doing in sourcing of securities. We were not in government, but we made sure that we advocated in parliament. I mean, those are just the few things. So we're saying we're not just going to sit back, we're going to push them to the latter core.
It will be made uncomfortable for you, Mr. Maliki, as part of that parliament. The EFF says it will challenge on issues relating to issues of the unemployed youth that we continue to see in South Africa.
Look, the president of the ANC and the ANC have said, let's grow South Africa together. And part of the programs that we have developed is to create an environment for investors to come into the country to invest and create jobs. Because it is not only the role of government alone to create jobs for everyone. But another thing that we need to engage, especially owners of capital, is that let's not be obsessed about maximizing profit. Our main objective must be to create jobs for as many people as possible, because you'll find that a job that is supposed to be done by 10 people is done by 5 people. It means that it leaves out 5 people who are supposed to be employed in the system. The second issue that we have agreed on is that we need to invest in small businesses, because small businesses have got a potential to create employment. We need to invest in them so that they create local economies, so that everyone can be able to participate in it. And we need to also, not everyone must be employed. And the president has pronounced himself that part of the stages that we're taking is to make sure that we introduce entrepreneurship as part of our subjects, as part of our subjects, so that we create as many entrepreneurs as possible to assist the country to create jobs.
Mr. Maliki, hold it right there. We'll continue with this discussion. Let's take a short break here on Unfiltered. We'll continue this discussion, of course, with some of the young members of parliament once we get back. Well, welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us here in Unfiltered. We're still talking to some of the young members of parliament where young people are expecting to represent them. We've also asked you to engage with us. Let's take a look at some of the tweets that you've sent to us. Wheezy says, it is not the age that matters. The individual political party's goals when it comes to youth would always prevail. If the party believes in youth empowerment, it will put those ideas forward with or without youth representation. Thanks, Wheezy, for engaging with us here. Nyambeni says, I truly believe they will address the issues of the youth problems. Thank you, Nyambeni, for engaging with us. Mkuseli says, I honestly don't think the environment is conducive for them to have such influence. They will be whipped to focus on organizational mandate. They will benefit by default. The out-of-parliament youth must claim the space in order to be able to dictate terms and not front. Thank you very much, Mkuseli, for engaging with us here on Unfiltered. I want to take this a bit forward. Just a couple of hours ago, we had the presidency send out a statement that the cabinet will be announced in a couple of days' time. And let me start with you, Mr. Maliki. You know, there are lots of expectations pertaining to this particular cabinet that President Cyril Ramaphosa will appoint. And I have to mention that you have individuals, for example, in the ANC, who've been found by the courts to have breached their oath of office. What kind of cabinet would you like to see your president put to the fore? And please address the issue as well pertaining to some of those who've breached their oath of office.
Look, the ANC has set up a committee called the Integrity Committee, and everyone that has breached the constitution, has done wrong, is subjected to a commission. If you have seen, also the deputy president of the country has led by example. When he was supposed to be sworn in as a member of parliament, he said, no, he can't do that. He must first subject himself to the Integrity Committee. The Integrity Committee must clear him. And if the deputy president can lead by example, everyone must do it. And I think the reason why the president is taking his time to appoint a cabinet, not rushing, because he wants to give everyone who's implicated an opportunity to clear themselves. And those who are not cleared, we don't expect to see them in cabinet. And
this would include someone like Batabile Dlamini? Would you want to see her outside of that executive?
Look, there is no court of law that has found Batabile Dlamini as a person guilty of...
the Constitutional Court?
I'm just saying there's no court of law that has found him guilty of that. That process has been appealed. Now, it's subjected to an internal process of the ANC. I know very well that Batabile Dlamini is also appearing in the Integrity Committee of the ANC. Now, after that process, we'll know very well how the president will act on it. This is not on me to decide who I want or who I don't want. It's a process that the movement have set up, and it must be respected. And everybody must be subjected to that process.
But as a young person, obviously, as you go into this particular space, you would want the ANC and those who sit in parliament to be of the highest integrity, of course, whether it is Batabile Dlamini or anybody else for that matter.
Look, the voters of South Africa will not vote for any political party that does not have integrity. Now, the ANC is a political organization that contests power.
Yeah.
It wants to win elections. It wants to be an organization with integrity. Now, we will not want to have a parliament that is full of people who have no integrity in society.
All right. We'll come back to that issue of Batabile Dlamini. Let's come to you, Mr. Kitse. Obviously, the EFF has also spoken. I saw leader Julius Malema speak yesterday at the inauguration on this particular aspect. He spoke about the likes of Pravin Gordhan. As a young person, you know, I know that many have argued, they said, well, if you want the EFF to speak about who should go into a parliament, you should have actually gotten the votes in the first place. But that's an issue for another day. What kind of parliament or cabinet, I beg your pardon, would you like to see as the EFF?
Look, I think the president should consider reducing the cabinet. I think that's the first thing, and he must do away with the deputy ministers. And because we are of the view that if he does that, he will be saving enough money for the country, because there's just too much spending that is happening on useless ministers. So that is one thing that we're eyeing, that he will have to do it, right? And you know, there's this Pravin issue. I mean, the public protector have just found that the men have breached he have breached the constitution and they have done illegal things in SARS. And therefore, of the view that he must be excluded from any appointment of a ministerial position. They must be consistent the same way they have been treating other people who were found guilty by the public protector. Let it also apply to Pravin Gordhan. We don't expect to see him there. And many other. It's just unfortunate for me to point out who, because almost everyone in that ANC list has their own shenanigans. As Bathabile Dlamini would have put it correctly, that everyone has their Smolanyana skeleton. She was correct. Everyone has their problems. That's why everyone who comes with another issue tomorrow, he has a problem too. And then it will continue like that. So you are correct. South Africans voted for them. They wanted to be led by thugs. Let it continue that way.
All right, let me bring you in there, Sonia Durbin. Let me give you enough time as well. As a young person, of course, sitting within that parliament, what kind of cabinet would you like to see that President Cyril Ramaphosa would announce in the next couple of days?
Well, firstly, I would like to see the president reducing the size of the cabinets, because I think that we spend so much money paying ministers and deputy ministers, as well as for their VIP protection services. Secondly, I would like to see the president appointing people who will be competent enough to deal with the pressing challenges that South Africa faces at the moment, such as unemployment. And then thirdly, I would like the president to appoint people who will work hard every day to bring South Africans from all walks of life together, because it is also very important to make sure that we don't have people in high offices who divide South Africans along racial lines, because our constitution at the very beginning of the document, it says that we, the people of South Africa, it doesn't say that we, the black people, or we, the white people, or we, the colored people, or we, the Indian people, but it says that we, the people of South Africa. So I really would like to see the president appointing those people.
All right, let's take a short break. We'll come back and continue this discussion, gentlemen. We'll have final words from you. We're running out of time. Let's take a short break here on Unfiltered. Final words from some of these young MPs when we get back.
Uptrost Lifestyle reporter.
We are told that some of them were nabbed by IEC officials whilst trying to vote for a second time.
That date, June 24th, is significant. It comes just before the G20 meeting taking place in Osaka, Japan.
This is an unprecedented joint inquiry by the Human Rights Commission as well as the Public Protector's Office.
Trends Travel is your ultimate hookup on all things arts, travel, entertainment, and lifestyle. We go far and wide discovering the world's undiscovered wonders. So be sure not to miss Trends Travel every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
We do not just speak. We let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach. We empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news. We place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain. We take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport. We create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling to ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses. It's all made possible by you.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority. The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
I have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solution to preserve the planet.
This is Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
Well, thank you very much for staying with us. Gentlemen, let me get last words from you. You all have 30 seconds each. What are you promising young people?
That corruption is going to be treated and destroyed the way we destroyed apartheid. Free and compulsory education is going to be achieved until tertiary level in its totality. Unemployment, we're going to fight unemployment and join hands with everyone to make sure that unemployed youth becomes a thing of the past in South Africa.
All right, your time is up, Mr. Kitse.
I think the quickest way, and this is what, it's not a long-term issue. All students who are owing the universities, those who are owing, because before we even reach the free education, there are a lot who are still owing, they are unable to access their results. We can really promise them that indeed they are going to be cleared from their debts, and we'll fight tooth and nail for that.
Mr. Kitse, thank you so much. Sibongiseni, your final remarks. You've got 30 seconds, please.
Myself, alongside the advocacy, we will make sure that we fight hard every single day in Parliament to make sure that there's a job in every home, that the 10 million unemployed South Africans who can't find work are able to find one. We are going to make sure that we stop corruption and that we hold the executive to account, because that is the most important function of any member of Parliament, to make sure that government is doing what it is supposed to do and not doing things that are against the law and unconstitutional.
All right, Sibongiseni, thank you very much for your time. Of course, this evening we have been asking you to participate as well. So let's take a look at our poll question that we were asking you. We're asking you if the representation, of course, of young people, the swearing in of younger MPs in Parliament will help address some of the issues facing the youth. It's 61% yes, 39% no, and that's where we'll have to leave it. Thank you very much for joining us. We play out, of course, with the visuals from yesterday's inauguration. Good night.
Trends Travel is your ultimate hookup on all things arts, travel, entertainment,